fed 15 long years to the wilderness. Some of them, the best years of my life. Now, mind you, I'm talking about Alberta, Canada, the northern frontier, where the crisp Arctic breezes roll across the jagged, snow-capped Rocky Mountains and weave on through the dense boreal forests at their feet. Right there, where you catch up to the warmer Chinook winds inland that sweep on through the tall, whipping grasslands and eroded badlands. You follow those winds, and that'll lead you straight on to the pine wall gates of old Fort Saskatchewan. It was the final hours of December back in 1879, and the first true days of winter in Alberta were already proving to be both bone-dry and bitterly cold. An uncomfortable pall had fallen over the misty trading outpost we called home. Once the engine tracker we knew as Swift Runner had returned, alone, from a 2-month stint in the deep wilds, where he had been engaged in hunting and fur trapping under the employ of the Hudson Bay Company and its top-dollar affiliates. Swift Runner, well, the man was a Plains Cree native whose own nomadic travels had seemingly cooled when he, his wife, 5 children, and twin brother finally settled themselves there in Fort Saskatchewan, our mixed community, right on the border of just about the most remote, dense, and inscrutable deciduous wilderness, really, anywhere on Earth. The wilds of northern Canada. That there ain't no place for a novice. No, sir. I'm talking about the kind of wilderness that'll chew you up and won't even have the common courtesy to spit you back out again. No, sir. Those woods, one misstep out there, and they'll swallow you whole. It's a damn hard place to make it work, the frontier. But it seemed, at least for a spell, that Fort Saskatchewan had become a blessed respite of comfort and safety for Swift Runner and his insular indigenous kin. And once he and his family was welcomed in and freed to set up camp, old Swift Runner and his twin brother, known around town as 3 Rivers, quickly made themselves useful. The 2 brothers, they plied their lifelong knowledge of foresting, trapping, and hunting and fishing to both of them land steady, fairly paid work. Old Swift Runner, he even ended up deputized as a forest guide for the Northwest Mounted Police. A rare posting for an indigenous. And that is where I first met old Swift Runner. I'll tell you this, even if you've been around your fair share of natives, Swift Runner, he made quite an impression. Standing at well over 6'5" with his broad, beveled shoulders and thick barreled chest, Swift Runner was a mountain of a man, and he was strong as an ox, yet he carried himself mostly with a surprising ease and kind of a curious grace. Yeah. At peace, Swift Runner, he had sort of an unworldly serenity about himself. And most of the time, the man seemed very much at home in his own skin. But, of course, over even the very first year of work he and his brother spent as contracted mountain guides, while his brother wisely saved his wages and kept to himself off hours, Swift Runner began a worrying habit of fraternizing with, let's just say, the lesser of the uniformed white men. Men who were still his superiors, mind you, at least as far as rank and, race were concerned. And through this folly into the culture and whims of the of the white man, Swift Runner quickly adopted a few of their lamentable vices, not least of which was the drink. Now, unimpeded by devilish spirits like whiskey and gin, Swift Runner had proven himself time and time again to be nothing less than a trustworthy and strident resident Injun. We lawmen he so surreptitiously supported, we would always beckon him pray tell tall tales of his people's past as lords of the plains, as we hiked out deep into the unincorporated territories together. The time had just fly as he regaled us with his tales of growing up, his teenage years spent brawling brown bears for sport. He'd ramble on for hours as we trekked on horseback well on up into the wilds. His stories helped kill the time and kept the men on an even keel for the most part, while on official dispatch in those endless foothills, whether we was searching for fugitive reprobates, the rare deserter, or mostly while organizing winter rescues well on up into the Rockies. Yeah. He was one hell of a storyteller, old Swift Runner. And by all accounts, when he was on the clock, Swift Runner remained, as far as I ever knew him at least, focused and sober as a judge. Then again, after hours, once the workday was done, Swift Runner would end up ensconced in the crowded, smoky bar rooms around town. And once the intimidatingly sized, narrow-eyed Indian imbibed his way into a salty, mean drunk, the sting of that burning brown elixir oft awakened a much darker side of the languid, otherwise stoic Cree full-blood. When Swift Runner got real good and real drunk, he could be dangerous. With half a tanker of red pepper rotgut in his belly, Swift Runner would start to get pretty damned ornery, unappeasable even. You could just feel that storm inside of him kicking up, that fire in his red blood starting to rage as the liquor tightened its grip. And then he'd be looking for a mark, someone whose face he didn't like, or some dumb rube who just sort of rubbed him the damn wrong way, and then, well, it'd be a fight. Swift Runner was a man of many talents, that much was certainly true. And fist fighting? That there was damn well truly one of them. Maybe even top of the list. The plain truth of it was, and most of the sensible enlisted men already knew the score, there was no harder man than old Swift Runner. At least not in Fort Saskatchewan, which made what became of him, and his brother, and his wife, and 5 young children, so much harder to ever capably comprehend. As the months spent in Saskatchewan continued to amble onward because of his habitual drunkenness and hell-raising, Swift Runner was beginning to spend more time locked up inside of a cage than he was in the employ of the men guarding it, which put the Northwest Mounted Police in a very sore spot. Even as deplorable as his drinking and his restlessness had become, Swift Runner remained truly a steadfast and loyal worker, never untimely. No matter how hungover or how raked over the coals he was, Swift Runner never missed a shift, nor a single moment of concentration on the trail, and I myself can very much attest to that fact. But after work was done each day, and he and the other men punched the clock and took to burning through their salaried incomes at the tavern hall each night, and as his drinking and rabble-rousing only worsened, the Northwest Mounted Police couldn't rightly ignore the problem anymore. As much as they clearly admired old Swift Runner and knew they would surely miss his services and stellar company. They had no choice but to cut him loose. Now, without a job, and already in debt due to his routine drunken gambling, Swift Runner and his wife and 5 children now only had his twin brother's meager income to rely upon, and they suddenly found themselves well and truly up against it. Yet, even though he had been summarily dismissed by the mounted police, Swift Runner still kept enough of a professional reputation to have his particular set of skills gainfully referred to an official trading agent of the Hudson Bay Company, less than a day's ride south of the fort. Hudson Bay offered old Swift Runner a lifeline, an opportunity to do some work that, in fairness, very few men would cotton to. A 2-month trip well on into the deep northwestern wilds to trap game. Now listen, this is precarious work. Hard ain't even the word. And that's before you factor in the harsh, unpredictable winter weather. But with no other options and with a young, growing family to consider, old Swift Runner steeled himself and gladly accepted the opportunity. However, without any feasible manner to guarantee housing for his family back in Fort Saskatchewan while he was gone, Swift Runner made the lamentable decision to bring his wife and children, and of course his twin brother, along with him up there into the deepest part of the wilderness. And just a little over a month later, Swift Runner emerged back out of the mist and returned to Fort Saskatchewan. Only he was empty-handed and entirely alone. The man had become so gaunt, so dispossessed of spirit. Even after just shy of a month away, he was barely recognizable to even those like myself who knew him well. He sat there, slumped, numb and silent and stinking of death. That's a very particular stench that don't rightly wash off so easy. He looked like a ghost, straight out of one of his tall tales. Looked like he'd been gone for years, not weeks. Some of the more conspiratorial minds even quietly speculated that perhaps this was not Swift Runner at all, but his own twin brother, 3 Rivers, embodying the former's identity with some unforeseeable motive. But when he finally started to speak, he first quietly told myself, Desk Sergeant William Hastings, and a couple of the other medical officers attending to his needs, that his entire family had died of starvation, and that he had laid them all to rest out there in the wilds. But, of course, none of what he was saying, and I mean none of it, made any logical sense. And so, while old Swift Runner laid up in the infirmary, recuperating and taking fluids, we were in secret dispatched. Just a small unit of us, myself and 3 other men. Men who'd learned the terrain riding with Swift Runner. We were set out to retrace his pathway on out into the deep interior, to see for ourselves what had become of his kin. We hiked out, the better part of 2 long, frigid days, following his contoured path through the pitiless, white-capped wilderness. Eventually, after much trepidation and unease, and with much worse weather threatening to hone in on us from the east, we set to it, and pretty quickly discovered the detritus of the former campsite used by himself, his brother, and of course, his family, which was now much easier to categorize as a mass grave. There were human bones scattered everywhere, but hardly any were found intact. They were pretty much all of them gnawed at and chewed up, with even the marrow sucked dry. Right by the remains of their campfire, there was a neatly stacked pile of human skulls of various sizes. And there was a black cast iron pot laying there atop that pile of ash, filled to the brim with what we discovered to be rendered human fat. These remains, what was left of Swift Runner's entire living bloodline, were just left to rot. Something that would be unimaginable, insidious even, to the Cree. Days later, we returned to Fort Saskatchewan, frostbit and sickened. Mounted authorities summarily arrested and imprisoned Swift Runner under lock and chain, where he soon implacably confessed to his part in the gruesome murders. But that alone did not come even close to appraising us of the full brunt of what befell Swift Runner and his kin way out there in those woods. Swift Runner had murdered his entire family, and then he had eaten from their remains. When we really bore down on him, Swift Runner finally broke his damnable silence, staring straight on through us while he spoke. And right then and there, the man claimed responsibility for these savage, inhuman acts. Yet, he stated emphatically that he had been possessed out there in the winter wilds by some manner of evil engine spirit. One that had driven him, in fact, truly against his prevailing will, to viciously slaughter and consume those he loved most. All 7 of them, just to sate what he described as an unspeakable hunger. None of them were spared, and none of them were saved. And none of us had ever heard anything like it. His account, it chilled the blood. Swift Runner, he kept calling it, in his own speak, an evil spirit that devours mankind. And I now know, all these years later, that this evil has been known to many of the first peoples of many incongruent tribes. The Algonquin, they call this evil Wendigo. The Abenaki, they call it the Kiwakwa. The Iroquois, they know it as the Stone Coat. And the Cree, as well as old Swift Runner himself, they called it the Wendigo. The tale Swift Runner told us all that day, what he said truly happened out there in those woods. Though I was shamefully ignorant to the truth then, I speak it to you now, if only to atone. I, for one, will never forget the last tall tale old Swift Runner ever told. Y'all keep calling me Swift Runner, but I want it known. That ain't my name.
That ain't my name no more. I am Ka Kisai Kuchin, brother. And that's what I want marked on my grave. If even I deserve one. After I tell you all what I seen and what I done. My family, Hwaka Doin, my brother and I, had trekked north the better part of 2 days and nights when he finally badgered me to stop so that we could make the first camp, so the children could rest. The weather already had me on my back foot, and I hadn't the time to waste. But for them, I relented as such. My brother, Hwaka Toin, he stayed behind to build shelter with my wife, while I begged off immediately with the long-range repeater and the musket to hunt, so to feed my family, my children, while I was away in the woods, trapping. It was after a day and a long night tracking a small herd of mule deer further inland, at a pace distance, that I found myself pretty well dug in. So once the winds died down a notch, I loaded my rifle and I waited. I had been snaking my way up the high hunting hills northwestward, through the wilds, tracking that sparse pack. About 8 miles as the crow flies from St. Albert proper, just about. Well on past the Nochimik Valley, into the deeper interior. The further north you go from there, you cross into the land of the others, the Watchers, the old gods of the ground, lingering earth spirits older than time itself. They alone dwell there, where man is not meant to go. Makiai Manito. While the game is said to be boundless in those dark woods, if you so much as get yourself turned around in there, brother, even if you think you know the woods, one false step and you'll never be seen again. You walk through that veil, you become Chipai, a mist, a wraith, and the most dangerous kind. Those that do not know that they are already long dead. Makiai Manito. The first fat flakes of wet snow had started to fly on that stiff northern air. And it was getting late, and I knew I couldn't make fire to keep warm and dry or risk giving up my position. As the hours dragged on out there into night, and I was alone, I grew more and more desperate, stuck in that freezing mud, amongst all of that damned black spruce, sitting there with my damned thoughts weighing on me, knowing I had damned us all, my family, Whakatorian, my little ones. The fear of impending destitution chewed on my mind, that I alone was only ever going to inflict more pain on my family because of my failings as a father and as a man. I needed this work, brother, this pay, to begin to make good again with my wife, to get my kin back in fair standing with the people of Saskatchewan, who had welcomed us into their community. As the dark gripped me, I began then to truly relent, to shame, and to grief. And brother, I fell down to my knees in the snowy mud, in the dark of night, and I began to truly despair. That's when I first heard it. Its wail in the near distance, maybe 150 meters south, maybe just southwest of me. I'd never heard anything like that sound in all of my days in the wild. Its starving scream cut through the black woods like a hot knife through warm larder. Before long, hunkered down there in that silent forest, I felt the unmistakable cold of its icy presence stalking me through the wilderness. It was hunting, and it was hunting me. It had picked up my sad stink on the cold night air, and now I could feel it hungering for me. When that scream sounded again, it was all but upon me, and soon this evil was within me. I felt the rattle of it within my very spirit, and then I knew. This, brother, this was the Wendigo. Now, I have always been a rational man, brother. You all know this of me. I am a lot of things, but I ain't no fool. I keep my head about me when I have my wits, away from the liquor and the fighting and the dice. I ain't no child. I do not believe in ghosts. I do not fear the darkness. And I do not cotton to nothing but what I can taste, smell, see. And hear. My father's mother, Nakoa Goon, once whispered the story of the Wendigo to us when we were only children, to frighten us off, wander in the woods by our lonesome. Nakoa Goon, yeah. She knew well of this wretched thing, and she told us to fear it, for all we are worth in this world. This evil, this Makiawatin, it's far older than the hills, far older than the woods and the rivers, far older than even the sun and its light. This thing come from out of the blackness. Tipiskawa, Tipiskawa. It wanders the woods unseen, and it watches, waiting in the wilds, on the wind, sniffing and smelling at the stark night air for the piquant smell of fear, or dread, or desperation. And brother, I was ripe with that stink. It hungers for this like nothing else. And once it has you, brother, It crawls on inside you. It takes root, encasing your heart in ice, living in your blood, behind your eyes, waiting, watching. It is a cursed one, a ga, a knock, a walking and a talking, looking every damn bit alive, but hollowed out inside, as dead can be. My people, they call it Monkey Eye, Manitou, an evil spirit that cannot die, that lives only to feed. The Wendigo. It eats the flesh of the dead with your mouth. I've never felt anything like that. That gnawing, that chewing at the gut. The Wendigo. It never lets you forget. Never. How damned hungry you are. And yet, the more it makes you kill, and the more it makes you eat, the more and more famished it makes you grow, and then what? There ain't no damn way out of it. No way to stop it but to keep on eating. You could chew up and swallow the very earth itself, and the Wendigo would not even be close to satisfied. And worse yet, once it was inside of me, brother, it knew my very thoughts, my secrets, my shame. There was nothing I could hide from it once it was within me, and it drove me, brother. It drove me night and day to stalk the woods. A terrible hunger in my gut like I have never known. I swear it, pale face. I begged for death. How foolish I was to think it would be so easy. I knew nothing yet of death until it made me bring it to the only human meat that could be found for miles. My own flesh and blood, my own family, who were just across the forest, eagerly awaiting my safe return. It drove me there, like a ravenous animal, back to the camp. It was so still just before dawn. They were all of them sleeping, but for my brother, who was already off, I'm sure, checking the traps. It made me pick up an axe I found leaning there against a tree. And though I swear it to you, brother, I tried to fight it, I tried. But it was all in vain. It made me bring that axe down onto my sleeping wife. The very first swing took off her head. And still it would not stop, no. It just kept making me swing that damned axe over and over and over until she was nothing but wet pulp. And then my brother, he was my twin. I got to him, my shadow, and I his. It made me stalk my own brother, Maka, through the forest in ambush. And then it drove me to overpower him. I cut his throat while he begged me to stop. and then I bashed his skull with a rock till he was dead, just so he'd quit staring back at me like that. I will not speak of what became of my 5 children. I had to bear witness to all of it from inside myself. I had to see it. I had to feel its glee with what it was making me do to them. And still, it wasn't nearly finished. After they all died, it made me drag them one by one to the tallest pine I could find, and it made me string them all up. It made me clean them and gut them and dress them. My own kin. And then, that damned impossible hunger, it made me do it. I had to eat them, brother. I had to do it. I had no choice. Now you listen. You all may not want to hear it, Baleface, but I am a human being just like you. Our hue may not be the same, but our hearts and the desires they carry, they are. We may have lived very different lives, in very different ways, but brother, we grow from the very same root. You look me in the eyes, Paleface, and you tell me, is this something a human being could do? Can a man do this? You look me good in the eyes, Paleface, and you look real hard,
and you tell me, can a man do that? Can a man do that? After old Swift Runner confessed to the murders and the unspeakable cannibalism of his entire family, the court virtually ignored his rambling account, chalked it all up to a psychosis, they said. Yeah. And they quickly found him guilty of all 7 murders. It was during the waning days of 1879 when Ka Kisai Kuchin, the man we knew as Swift Runner, was hanged without incident by the standing sheriff there at Fort Saskatchewan. 60 folks, more or less, gathered there in the cold to watch that big old Injun hang for what he done. I can attest to the simple fact that the man met his fate quietly and without so much as a fuss. Old Swift Runner went to the rope, quietly singing to himself. The sound of it carried on the breeze. None of us celebrated it, and after he was dead and gone, most just moved on. I remained on duty at Fort Saskatchewan the better part of 2 more years, but I just couldn't never shake the feeling that out there in those deep woods, surrounding us on every side, something, something was waiting. Something old and something dark. Something hungry.
By the frozen pines you hear it, a breath with a human name. Boot marks in the morning snow. goes dry, one hunger drags you back. Don't turn around, don't answer that sound. It wears your face, then it takes you down. Wendigo, Wendigo, it's hungry tonight. Wendigo, Wendigo, it eats the light. Wendigo, Wendigo, don't follow the call. Wendigo, Wendigo, it devours us all. It devours us all. When brother turns on brother, it steals the food from your hands, then teaches you to smother. You see it in the shaking jaw, in the eyes that won't stay kind, an evil spirit in the marrow, a curse inside the mind. Don't turn around, don't answer that sound. Where's your face, then it takes you down. Wendigo, Wendigo, it's hungry tonight. Wendigo, Wendigo, it eats the light. Wendigo, Wendigo, don't follow the call. Wendigo, Wendigo, it devours us all. And the cold speaks back. You can hear the old ones worn on the frozen track.